She cheated on me, then paid her lover with my wallet to keep the secret. I pressed play and watched my life lie to my face. For 8 years, I thought I had it figured out. I'm 36M, married to Claire 34. We've got 2 kids, Ethan 7 and Maddie 5. We live in a gorgeous house, travel when we want, and I've never worried about money a day in my life. My family's old money wealthy, and while I work in our real estate arm, the truth is I could quit tomorrow and be fine. Claire used to be warm, funny, and sharp. She could work a charity dinner crowd like she'd been born for it, but she was also the mom who sat on the floor building Lego castles with the kids. Then, about a year ago, it changed. She started getting jumpy. Her phone was never out of arm's reach. She'd step out to take a call, instead of talking in front of me. She'd get defensive over the smallest things, like if I asked why yoga classes were suddenly 3 hours long. And it wasn't just me noticing. My sister, Brooke, pulled me aside at a family barbecue and said, "What's up with Claire? She's wound tighter than a drum lately." I brushed it off, told her it was just stress. But even I couldn't ignore it after one night when I rolled over in bed and caught Claire sitting up in the dark, lit only by her phone. She flinched when she realized I was awake, shoved it under her pillow, and muttered something about Pinterest ideas. At the time, I didn't know that moment was the first ripple from a much bigger wave heading straight for me. 2 weeks later, I got the first real crack in the facade. It was a Wednesday night, kids in bed, Claire in the shower. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally, I'm not the type to snoop, but this time, the screen lit up with a preview that stopped me cold. Unknown, next payment by Friday. Or your husband sees the photos. My brain stalled for a second. Payment. Photos. I grabbed the phone and took a screenshot before the notification disappeared. The text thread was short but ugly. 3 other messages, all from the same number, over the past month. "Don't test me, Claire. You know I'll send them. $5,000 this time. In cash. Loved our last meeting. Might keep some pics for myself." My stomach turned. This wasn't some scammer. This was someone who knew her, someone she'd met up with recently enough for him to be cocky. I couldn't stop myself. I opened her Photos app. Buried in the hidden album were a dozen shots of her in lingerie I'd never seen, sprawled across what definitely wasn't our bed. A man's hand, tan and hairy, was in one of the frames. The shower turned off. I put the phone back exactly where it was and slid into bed like nothing happened, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wasn't ready to confront her yet. I needed more. And I knew, deep down, that whatever I found next was going to make those photos look tame. The next morning, I left for an early meeting, but went straight to my office downtown. My family's wealth is managed through a trust, but Claire and I share a couple of personal accounts for day-to-day stuff. I logged into the joint one first. There it was, transfers to an account I didn't recognize. $3,000 here, for $1,500 there, all labeled as consulting fee in the memo line. Cute. Then I pulled the statements from our credit cards. That's when I saw the withdrawals. Large, round numbers, always from ATMs in random parts of town. One was in the parking lot of a strip mall I knew had no reason for her to be there. I called my cousin Drew, who's also our family's financial advisor. Told him I was looking for irregularities and asked him to quietly send me the past year's activity on all accounts Claire had access to. By lunchtime, I had my answer. She'd burned through close to $40,000 over the last 6 months. Some of it was from our personal accounts, some from a savings account my parents had set up for her projects. She'd even sold 2 pieces of jewelry I'd given her, a diamond bracelet and a Cartier watch. Both were missing from her jewelry box, which I'd assumed she had just stored somewhere. This wasn't just cheating. This was full-on financial betrayal. And the worst part? She was using my family's money to keep the guy who screwed her from screwing up her life. I decided then, I wasn't going to just stop this. I was going to make her pay. That night, after the kids were asleep, I told Claire we needed to talk. She was in the kitchen, scrolling on her phone, a glass of Sauvignon Blanc in front of her. I slid the printed bank statements and the screenshot of the blackmail text across the counter. Her eyes flicked over the paper, then back to me. "You went through my phone? And our accounts?" I almost laughed. "That's your takeaway?" She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's not what you think." "Oh, really? Because it looks like you've been paying some guy thousands of dollars to keep his mouth shut about the fact that you were in his bed, in lingerie, with his hands all over you. So please, tell me what I'm supposed to think. She stared at me for a long moment, then tried the victim angle. It was a mistake. I was lonely, and it happened once. But then he wouldn't leave me alone. He started threatening to send you the photos. I've been paying him to protect the family. I shook my head. Protect the family? You've been bleeding us dry to protect yourself from the consequences of your own choices. She slammed the wine glass down so hard I thought it might crack. If you divorce me, I'll lose everything. The house, the kids, my life. Is that what you want? No, I said. What I want is a wife who doesn't cheat on me and then pay her lover with my money to keep me in the dark. Since I clearly don't have that, we're going to do this my way now. She narrowed her eyes. And what's that supposed to mean? You'll find out. And I walked away before she could say another word. The next morning, I switched gears completely. No more icy glares or clipped sentences. I went full concerned husband mode. Over breakfast, I told Claire, I've been thinking maybe we can handle this together. If we pay him off one last time, maybe he'll finally back off. She blinked, suspicious at first, but the fear in her eyes softened into relief. You'd really help me with this? Of course, I said, lying through my teeth. We just need to be smart about it. Get everything in writing, make sure he can't come back for more. What she didn't know was that I'd already looped in two people. My cousin Drew, the financial whiz, and my old college roommate Caleb, who now worked in private security. Between the two of them, we drafted a plan. Bait the guy with the promise of a big payout, have Caleb's team on standby, and catch him in the act of extortion. I kept the act up for a week. Asked Claire for details like I was building a strategy. Where did you meet him? How does he like to communicate? Has he ever threatened you in person? All the while feeding Caleb every scrap of information. Finally, she told me he wanted to meet in person to prove he deleted the photos. Perfect. I offered to go with her, but she insisted I stay out of sight so he wouldn't get spooked. I pretended to agree. In reality, I was going to be closer than she realized, and so was the law. The meet was set for a Friday afternoon in the parking lot of a mid-range hotel just off the interstate. Classy. Claire dressed like she was going to a casual lunch. Jeans, oversized sweater, big sunglasses. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was nervous about being seen with him. I stayed behind the wheel of my black SUV at the far edge of the lot, Caleb's unmarked car 2 spaces over. Daniel. Yeah, I finally had a name, pulled in right on time. Mid-40s, fit, smug smirk that made me want to put my fist through his teeth. He stepped out holding a small manila envelope and a phone. Claire got out, clutching her purse like it was full of cash. They spoke for a minute. Then he leaned in close, brushing her arm, and that was the moment Caleb's guys moved. 2 plainclothes approached from either side, badges flashing. Daniel's eyes went wide. One agent said, "Sir, you're being detained for attempted extortion." The other confiscated his phone and the envelope. Claire froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "What is this?" she demanded. I got out of my SUV and walked toward them. "This," I said, "is me making sure my wife doesn't get bled dry by some low-rent blackmailer she never should have been with in the first place." Her face went pale. Daniel shouted something about entrapment as they cuffed him, but it didn't matter. Caleb had every message, every bank transfer, every disgusting threat documented. As the squad car pulled away, Claire turned to me, her voice shaking. "You had no right." I cut her off. "You had no right to cheat on me and fund your lover with my family's money. Now we're even." I didn't tell her the real truth. We were just getting started. Claire had always cared more about her image than anything else, even our marriage. In our social circle, perception was currency, and she'd spent years cultivating the perfect wife, perfect mom persona. So I went after that, quietly. I didn't blast her affair on Facebook or drop sordid details into group chats. Instead, I started with carefully placed comments at the right dinner parties. Claire's been under a lot of stress lately, some personal issues, I'd say, then let the silence hang. People love filling in blanks. At the next charity gala, I made sure to work the room solo, shaking hands and laughing with mutual friends, casually mentioning that Claire was taking some time for herself. Again, no specifics, just enough to make them curious. Word spreads fast in our crowd. By the end of the month, she was getting fewer invites. I overheard one friend tell another, "I'm not sure we should seat Claire next to the Donnellys. You know how they gossip." The real hit came when I had Drew, my cousin, suggest, to the board of a prominent fundraiser that Claire stepped back until things settle. That fundraiser had been her crown jewel, the one event she bragged about running every year. When they politely took her up on the suggestion, she came home livid. "Did you have something to do with this?" she demanded. I just shrugged. Maybe people don't want to be associated with someone who's been in the news for extortion cases. She went pale. "That wasn't me." "They don't care." I cut in. "Perception is everything, remember?" She hated hearing her own words turned on her. Once Daniel was in custody and Claire's social standing had started to crumble, it was time to hit her where it would hurt most: the money. I called my family's attorney, Mitchell, a man who'd been managing our affairs since I was in college. I laid everything out: the affair, the blackmail, the withdrawals, the asset sales. Mitchell didn't even blink. "With your prenup, this is straightforward. We'll file on grounds of marital misconduct and financial recklessness. She'll walk away with very little." Music to my ears. The prenup had been my mother's idea. Love is love, but money needs rules, she'd said before the wedding. Claire had signed it without much fuss back then, probably thinking she'd never need to worry about it. I instructed Mitchell to freeze every account she could touch, cancel her credit cards, and pull her name off any household asset that wasn't already protected under my trust. When the papers were ready, I didn't hand them to her myself. I had them served while she was having lunch with one of her remaining friends at a country club cafe. The look on her face, caught in the corner of a cell phone photo by another patron, was pure shock. That photo made the rounds faster than any rumor I could have spread myself. That night, she stormed into the house, my house, slamming the door behind her. "You're divorcing me? After everything I've done to fix this?" I laughed, actually laughed. "You mean after everything you've done to hide this?" "Yeah, Claire. It's over." She glared at me, jaw tight, and said, "You'll regret this." I leaned back, calm as ever. "No, Claire. You will." It happened faster than even I expected. Claire's calendar used to be packed: lunches, fundraisers, charity planning sessions, spa days with her friends. Within a month of being served, it was empty. The whispers had turned into open avoidance. At the country club, she'd walk into the lounge and conversations would mysteriously wrap up in seconds. The women she used to lead in committee meetings suddenly didn't have time for coffee. Invitations to galas, dinners, and luncheons dried up overnight. Her closest ally in that crowd, Marissa, sent her a text saying she needed to focus on her family right now, which was rich, considering Marissa's husband was one of the loudest gossip spreaders in the group. The board for the big charity she used to chair officially restructured her position out of existence. I'd heard from Drew that a few members didn't even want her name mentioned in connection to the event anymore, worried donors might pull out. Financially, the hit was worse. With the accounts frozen and her cards canceled, she was living off whatever was in her personal checking, which wasn't much, given her spending habits. She couldn't even put gas in her luxury SUV without asking me for it. When she finally did, I told her, "Take the sedan. The SUV's in my name." Watching her stomp off in that older car like a sulking teenager was more satisfying than I cared to admit. She'd built her whole life around appearances and access. Now both were gone, and I didn't even have to raise my voice to take them from her. Ethan and Maddie didn't know the details, and I intended to keep it that way. They were too young to understand affairs, blackmail, or social exile. All they'd see was mom upset and dad busy with grown-up stuff. The key was consistency. Their routines stayed the same: school drop-offs, bedtime stories, Saturday pancakes. I made sure their lives didn't skip a beat, even if everything else around us was unraveling. When Claire tried to push for more flexible custody, which basically meant she wanted the kids whenever she felt like it, I shut it down. My lawyer filed for primary custody with her getting scheduled visitation. Given her instability, the financial mess, and the extortion case tied to her name, the judge didn't hesitate to side with me. I also locked down their futures financially. I moved their college funds and trusts into accounts only I could access. I made sure that even if Claire somehow came into money later, she couldn't use their names as a backdoor into my resources. With the kids, I stayed neutral about her. No bad-mouthing. No bitterness. If Ethan asked why mom wasn't coming to the soccer game, I'd just say, "She had something come up, bud. We'll see her soon." They didn't need the poison. Claire noticed the shift. Once, during a tense custody exchange, she snapped, You're making them hate me. I met her glare with calm. No, Claire. You're doing that all by yourself. By the time the divorce proceedings were halfway through, Claire had already lost her grip on most of our shared resources. But there were still a few loose ends, and I wasn't leaving them for her to pull on later. Mitchell, my attorney, and I went line by line through every account, every investment, every property deed. Anything with her name on it that wasn't ironclad mine by prenup was either sold, transferred, or restructured into the family trust. She'd inherited a small portfolio from her aunt years ago, one of the few assets she technically owned outright. I could have left it alone, but during the discovery process, we uncovered that she'd used those stocks as collateral to secure a short-term loan to pay Daniel. That little stunt violated a clause in our prenup about reckless financial behavior. Mitchell moved fast, filing for damages. The settlement terms redirected the remaining value straight into a trust for the kids. She'd never see a dime of it again. The final blow came with the house. She begged to keep it for the children's stability, but since it was purchased outright by my family before the marriage, the court saw it as non-marital property. Translation: she was out. When the order was finalized, I had her belongings boxed and sent to the modest rental she'd managed to secure. No drama, no confrontation, just a clean removal. That night, I stood in the empty master bedroom, looking at the space where her vanity used to sit, and felt something I hadn't in months: peace. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Without the money, the house, or the social network she'd built her life around, Claire started spiraling. I heard from Brooke that she'd shown up at a charity luncheon uninvited, wearing the same dress she'd worn 2 months before, and tried to insert herself into a conversation. The hostess politely asked her to leave. Then came the social media posts, vague quotes about betrayal and finding out who your real friends are, mixed with heavily filtered selfies. The comments were sparse, mostly from strangers or acquaintances she barely knew. The women she used to tag in every group photo were silent. A week later, Marissa, her old ally, called me. I ran into Claire at the spa, she said. She's not doing well. Started crying in the lobby. Told me you ruined her life. I didn't bother correcting her. In her mind, I was the villain because I'd stopped letting her use me as a shield. The real breaking point came at Maddie's school recital. She sat 2 rows behind me, alone. I could feel her eyes on my back the entire time. When the kids were released to their parents afterward, she tried to pull Maddie into a hug, but Maddie clung to me instead. Claire's face crumpled, and she left without a word. That night, I got a long, rambling text from her about how she'd made mistakes, but didn't deserve to be erased. I didn't reply. The truth was, I'd already erased her from my life. Now she was just realizing it. Once Claire's presence in my life had been reduced to nothing more than court-ordered custody exchanges, the air around me felt different, lighter. I stopped spending mental energy tracking her downfall. It wasn't my problem anymore, and honestly, watching her unravel had lost its thrill. I'd gotten what I wanted: distance, control, and peace for me and the kids. I poured my attention into Ethan and Maddie. We started a Sunday breakfast tradition, just the 3 of us. Sometimes it was pancakes at home, sometimes a diner in town. No phones, no rush. Just us. I also started reclaiming parts of myself I'd shelved during the marriage. Picked up cycling again, something Claire used to call a midlife crisis on 2 wheels. Signed up for a local 50-mile charity ride. The training was brutal at first, but it felt good to be pushing my body for me, not to impress anyone. Brooke introduced me to a friend of hers at a backyard barbecue. We chatted for a while, light, easy, no pressure. It wasn't a date, just a reminder that there were people out there who could smile at me without hidden agendas. One night, after tucking the kids in, I poured a bourbon and sat on the patio. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I realized then, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living again. By spring, the chaos felt like a past life. The kids were thriving. Ethan made the soccer travel team. Maddie had her first piano recital. My work with the family business was steady, but I'd shifted my schedule to be home for dinners and bedtime stories. My mornings became my favorite part of the day. I'd wake up early, ride 20 miles before sunrise, and come back to make breakfast before the kids were up. That routine gave me something I hadn't had in years: control. Not over anyone else, just over my own life. I also leaned into travel. Not the networking trips and luxury vacations Claire used to orchestrate for photo ops, but the kind where you actually experience something. The three of us spent a week in the Smoky Mountains. No Wi-Fi, just hiking, campfires, and card games by lantern light. Ethan told me it was the best trip ever, and Maddie cried when we had to pack up. Socially, my circle shifted. The people who'd only tolerated me because of Claire vanished, but real friends stuck around, and a few new ones emerged. They didn't care about my last name or my bank account, and that was refreshing. Even my parents noticed. Over dinner one night, my mom said, "You look 10 years younger." My dad raised his glass and added, "Freedom will do that to a man." They were right. This was the life I should have been building all along, and now I finally was. If you'd told me a year ago that my wife was cheating, that her lover would blackmail her, and that I'd dismantle her entire life without raising my voice, I would have laughed in your face. I thought stories like that happened to other people. Messy people, reckless people. Not to me. But here's the thing. Betrayal doesn't discriminate. It doesn't care how good you are, how much you provide, or how carefully you've built your life. If someone's willing to lie, they'll do it with a smile and a steady hand. I learned the hard way that you can't save someone from themselves. I tried, in those first few days after I found out. I thought maybe I could help her out of the mess. But people who drag you into their disasters don't want rescue. They want cover. I also learned that revenge doesn't have to be loud. You don't have to burn the house down to win. Sometimes the most devastating revenge is pulling your support, your money, your presence, and letting them choke on the vacuum you leave behind. Most importantly, I learned that my worth was never tied to her approval, or our social circle, or even the marriage. My value is in how I show up for my kids, for the people who matter, and for myself. If you're in the middle of something like this, here's my advice. Stop asking why they did it. Stop looking for the perfect apology. Focus on building a life so good that their absence feels like addition, not subtraction. Because one day, you'll wake up, look around, and realize you're not just surviving anymore. You're free. I have many other stories. Go to my channel, subscribe so you don't lose us. Give me a thumbs up.